Welcome to yet another episode of Indigenization Appreciation Hour. This one is, of course, in the new format, and with me today is my associate Sriram Tyagarajan, who has apparently recovered from the Aero India sundowning effect which kept him from joining us in the last episode. So, anyway, with keeping in mind that there might still be some after effects, let us now get to it. So this particular episode of Indigenization Appreciation Hour is also going to focus on the key takeaways from Aero India 25, and we are going to talk about the main programs, obviously, like the Tejas Mark II, the AMCA, the main programs that are currently in development. So those are the programs we'll talk about, but we'll of course talk about other issues as well, and other less sort of covered projects as well. So to start with, let's talk about the Tejas Mark II. So as you know, the program is now, as I said the last time, it's out of the stovepipe and into the light. So LRUs have all been qualified. We'll just turn to Shriram in a moment. I'll just lay it out a bit. So all the LRUs have been qualified. LRUs that will go into it. Apparently, 70% of the LRUs have already populated what is intended to be the airframe, and prototyping is well underway. The current outer limit for a first flight is the first quarter of 2026. The first flight could well happen by the end of 2025 itself. So that is where the Tejas Mark II project is at the moment. And as you know, this is a critical project because it will serve as a bridge for the Indian aerospace sector in terms of going from a four plus gen platform to a true five plus gen platform, which is what the AMC is intended to be. So with that sort of preamble, let us now turn to Sriram and let's see what he has to say about the state of the Tejas Mark II program. Over to you, Sriram. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead. I think we can all hear you. Oh, they can't? I see. Okay. So while Sriram sort of fixes his audio, let us also look at what else has been happening. We, of course, have to talk about the AMCA as well. Sriram, I think they still can't hear you, probably. Okay. So, can you hear Sriram now? Sriram, say something. Okay. Okay. So while Sriram sort of fixes things at his end, let me just take a question, quick question. So we have Gaurav Malhotra asking, why no underwing or side? You mean conformal weapons bay for AMCA? Aren't we going the same way on AMCA like it happened with Tejas Mark One? Not really. See, I'll tell you one thing. I know there are a lot of people who want a couple of conformal sort of bays as well for short range or within visual range air to air missiles. But when you talk about something like the AMCA, and when you talk about the AMCA in silent mode, the whole idea is either penetrating a dense air defense network with a certain kind of weapons package, or taking long range BVR shots, basically beyond visual range air to air missile shots. And that 1.5 ton internal weapons bay that you see on the AMCA is actually adequate for that kind of a mission profile. Now you could crib about why there aren't two more side bays housing WVR AAMs within visual range air to air missiles. But really, if it comes to that, if it comes to a point where you have to use within visual air to air missiles with the AMCA when it is supposedly flying in stealth mode, then something has either gone wrong, or that particular scenario that you often hear about, that what will happen when two stealth fighters will have face off against each other. So often the answer is that they'll dogfight or something. But I don't think that is the answer really, because stealth fighters as such will be, part and parcel of a system of systems. So you have to understand that the AMCA also is going to play precisely that role in the emerging network centric warfare architecture of the Indian Air Force. So there's no point in going on and on about whether it should have had two more conformal bays or not for AMS. In my view, it is my considered opinion. Of course, there can be a future. There can be an argument made that you always should be you. There should always be contingencies for anything. Well, that can be an argument, I guess. But given its intended role, and especially the role it is going to play in the Indian Air Force, I think it's sort of silent loadout, or the loadout for its internal weapons bay is adequate. In the future,
yeah, the whole point. I hope people can hear me now. The whole point is to not look at them as separate entities when it comes to war fighting. I have two UPSs and just cut through all of them. Yeah.
My God.
Power.
Are we back or not?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Yeah. Back online. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Had a brilliant power cut that cut through two of my UPSs. So sorry. Yeah. So.
Shriram, I think you should talk about the Tejas Mark II first before we go back to the AMCA.
Yeah, I got it. So just hold on one second.
Yeah, what's going on? Apparently, there's an echo as well.
Yeah, now I hope it's better.
This is definitely the most. Is becoming the most intriguing episode of IH thus far.
Okay, yeah, now I think it's better. So, so like I said before the whole interruption thing, LCA Mark II is already under development, and the prototype manufacturing is in progress, and they're hoping to get it fully assembled by early third quarter this year. September-ish, right? That's their deadline. That's when they want to roll it out. And then, beautiful. And then do all of their ground tests, right? So there is the engine ground run, low speed trials, high speed trials, and get all of that sorted out, make sure everything works. And then by early next year, say in a year's time by now, they want to fly. Like first flight of the Tejas Mark II. And I would say the Tejas Mark II's first flight is as important as the original 2001 LCS first flight. Right? Cannot be underestimated, because it will shut down a lot of voices who are still pining for an import. And remember, if you look at the specs, put them side by side, the Tejas Mark II is a 2025 or say 2026 version of the IAF's original Dream Girl, which is the Mirage 2000. It does the same things. 2 hour useful flight range and 11 hard points and everything that the IAF wants to throw at its enemies. So, yeah, I think all of us are waiting for that. And when it comes to subsystems, right? So when it comes to subsystems, the original plan was to use a few important components, the IRST, a couple of internal subsystems, right? So the first prototype might still have the imported subsystems like the IRST and the refueling probe and everything, but we now have our own programs for all of these, including the refueling probe. So by the time we get to the second, maybe the third, which might be a realistic target, we might have all of our own subsystems flying on them. We have IRST parallel. I think we have 3 parallel programs for the IRST. One for the particularly the Su-30, where we have the OLS flying, which is the Russian OEM device, and we have 3 parallel programs for the IRST. IRD has one, HAL has one, and then there is a private sector company who's also working on them, who've been directly approached. So when it comes to confidence about all of these indigenous systems coming online, right, there is a tremendous amount of confidence. Radar, so everybody, I'm sure, who has followed our work knows that the confidence is sky high. So radar is one thing that is assumed to be about to be ready. And remember, the Tejas Mark II radar is just a different form factor of the same radar, which is going for the Tejas Mark 1A. And the Tejas Mark 1A, LRD wants to push it even before the contracted 41st Mark 1A unit article. And if the whole system works, they would rather push it even earlier, say from the 21st itself. So that is the level of confidence in the Tejas Mark 1A radar, which is the same thing as the one that is going to go on the Tejas Mark II. Just that because the nose cone is a slightly different shape, the radar antenna itself has had to be slightly modified to fit that form factor. But essentially, it's the same radar. Number of TRMs and the whole backend is all the same. And again, for the AMCA, I hope everybody's seen our chat with the additional project director. The confidence again is sky high, and like Saurav was just talking about, right? Even I mean, him too, he just doesn't show it, but we all want a big heavy fighter 30-ton class which has 6 air-to-air missiles in the main internal weapons bay and 2 each in the side base to carry an enormous air-to-air load. But the whole focus is shifting to having the fighter as not one independent entity which fights. If you, I'm sure a lot of us have read about strike missions that went into Pakistan during the 71 war and even during 65, right? Very interesting. But what you see is 4 aircraft flights, 2 aircraft flights, going all the way, doing navigation at night, using stop clock and maps and everything. And that kind of warfare is not what will happen in the future. The fighter will not be a standalone entity. The IAF still does not have enough support elements, but those will happen, right? So the Netra Mark 1A will happen. The A320 based AWACS will also happen. Refuers is happening, right? So all of these will come into play within the next few years. So the fighter itself will no longer be a separate entity which is fighting on its own. It will be a system of systems flying and fighting against another system of systems. Remember, if you have to go into Tibet, you will not be fighting just the PLA-AF. You're fighting against a very dense IADS. And we've had an article from way back on the kind of IADS that the Air Force will face in Tibet. So you cannot have the old graphic of a Jaguar going and hitting an armored column in Tibet. That might sound fancy, but going forward, the Chinese are not going to let you do that. They have a very dense IADS, very dense ELINT and EW system in place. So you will have to fight through all of that. And you can't just have one entity fighting through it. Your entire system has to fight against it, which will be air, land, and all the way to space. And everything from ground up all the way to geostationary altitude. So your fight is one part of that. So why I keep repeating this is because the fighter has to work with all of these systems, and the man in the loop has to pull information from all of these and he will act as another source of information for the whole entity and provide information to somebody else who might go into attack. So a lot of automation is required that the aircraft itself can do and parse all of this information, provide it to the pilot in useful form. That way, he has a reduced load when it comes to actually flying the plane, but can put most of his effort into performing the mission, be it electronic intelligence or strike or against enemy aircraft, right? So this involves a lot of automation and a lot of sensor fusion and data link with other entities in the system, be it a HAPS platform, be it AVAX, be it satellites or UAVs or ground systems, right? So if you have ground forces, be it armor, infantry, or even unmanned ground vehicles, you need to be able to talk to all of these and provide information back to the ISCCS, who will interact with the other services, and decision making will be done in the background by the higher ups. So the aircraft itself will need to be like a mega computer which can do all of these at the same time. Even the aircraft
And
itself has multiple sensors, the
yeah.
radar, ELINT systems, IRST, DAS, EOTS, everything has to be put together. And the system itself has to give a clear picture to the pilot because he's focusing on the mission. Yeah, you were going to say something, Saurav?
And no, that is what I'm saying, and that is where the Tejas Mark II is so important. Okay, because
Correct.
the Tejas Mark II has these technologies, these fifth and fifth plus gen technologies integrated onto it. It will have a pilot associate. It will be capable of multi-sensor data fusion. It will be capable of moving information around the battle space, as it were, as a node. The whole idea is what Sridham was saying was that the fighter of tomorrow will be a node in a very large network,
Correct.
right? And it'll have to be a very capable node. So those are the considerations that you will have to keep in mind when talking about fighter aircraft in the future. And even though the Tejas Mark II is not a stealthy fighter, it's not, you won't call it fifth gen, but it has a lot of elements in it which are actually beyond what fifth gen fighters have, right? So we must keep in mind, I'm emphasizing this point because a lot of people bring up this question about obsolescence, whether it's going to be obsolescent very soon or obsolete altogether. I know there are some very noted experts who like using this terminology vis-a-vis the Tejas Mark II, but that is not really the way things are. The Tejas Mark II, quite simply put, is not just going to be something that is going to form a very important node in the network of tomorrow. It is also going to shape doctrinaire, as it were, as this system of systems approach evolves in the Indian Air Force, and basically pave the ground for optimal exploitation of the AMCA as well in the future. So it's not just a bridge to the AMCA in terms of technology or techno industrial capability. It is going to be something that serves the purpose of being a training tool for what the AMCA is envisaged to be in the Indian Air Force's network centric warfare scheme of things. Now, you mentioned the support platforms, so let us share with our viewers some of the updates on that front as well. That has been gleaned from Aero India 2025.
Nee, Uh, no, we'll talk about money later, Raman.
Uh, no,
Yeah,
but
well,
no, but to be okay, but okay. So let us talk about the AMCA only. We put up that interview with the assistant director, etc., and I've been going through the comment space of that particular video, and it seems that a lot of people are simply echoing the kind of sentiments that are being negative sentiments that are being bandied about here and there. Now, tell me, what is the sense that you got as far as the progress of the AMCA? See, I listed out the 5 steps that sort of the fighter aircraft development follows after full scale engineering development is sanctioned by the government. The first is subsystems testing. The second is system realization, right? The third is integration and testing said subsystems and as a system. Once the whole system has been conceived in the stage 2, the fourth step is of course prototyping and rollout, and the fifth step is the maiden flight. And there are a whole bunch of things that happen before the maiden flight, from engine ground runs to high speed, low speed taxi trials, high speed taxi trials, etc. So given given what you have gathered at Aero India 2025, where would you place AMCA development at the moment, in terms of steps 1 to 5?
Um, again, like I said, um, it's not just the airframe, it's not just what it can carry, but it's about what it can do as one part of the entire warfighting system. I think that realization is very clear among the developers. So, uh, their focus, apart from the whole airframe itself and all the subsystems that go into it, is also on what it can do as a computing platform, right? So, uh, not just taking sensor data from the platform itself, but also about uh, distributing to other nodes in the network and getting information from them to perform the mission. And the other thing is that, like we've spoken, I think 3 4 IH episodes back, about having the whole manned unmanned teaming, right? Where you end up controlling, uh, you end up having one or a few manned platforms controlling a whole host of unmanned platforms. So all of this requires taking away and automating a lot of piloting workload so that the pilot can work on the mission aspects. So there is a lot of work going on these things. You might have heard the program directors of or ADA director talking about AI copilot and smart copilot and pilot enabling software being developed for the AMCA. So there's a lot of work already going on these systems. So all of these, what they do is they remove a lot of manual workload from the pilot. Say checking fuel, the amount of fuel left, or about navigation, right? Certain things that you would think that are part of piloting, but they can be automated or pushed to the background where the computer does most of the work and the pilot just oversees, rather than having to put in a huge amount of effort to doing those tasks, so that the pilot can sit and concentrate on his mission, be it assigning mission parameters to the unmanned fleet that he's flying with, or about gathering ELINT and figuring out what he's seeing and what data he's gathering, and provide more information to the guys who are running the mission at the back, right? Be it either an AVAX platform or via a HAPS or a high flying hail UAV back to the ground systems. So these are more important tasks for the pilot to do rather than actually flying. So the developers are doing a lot of work on these systems. I saw Rishabh had a question on IRST and EOTS. So I did ask that question, and it is under development. Like I said, for the Su-30 program, the subsystems for the Tejas Mark II is also being developed. And I had posted a picture on Twitter a couple of years back about the IRST being developed. And we saw a unit, prototype unit being displayed at Aero India this week. It is coming along very quickly, and it will go through flight trials soon, and we'll see it on the AMCA. And even the DAS, right? The spherical all-round 360-degree view for the aircraft. So just like you might have seen on the F-35 videos, right? Where whatever the sensor sees is projected on the HMDS, helmet-mounted display. And the pilot can see through the aircraft itself and get a picture of anything that's flying around. So wherever he looks, he can see a picture based on what the sensors are seeing. And the EOTS is just gone into development. So we might see it on the AMCA under the chin after a few years. And Even the DAS related systems have already flown on the business jet, which is being used for radar trials. So all of these are getting developed, and maturity is good. And radar, so everybody knows there's a lot of development going on. Antenna level, TRMM level, process node level, as well as technology level. From gallium arsenide, we're moving to gallium nitride, and it is already there on the EW pods. Coming to the EW stuff, the Tejas ASPJ is going into trials, and another 30 sorties, and it should be ready for deployment. Right. So these are things that are in very good stand today because they've done all of their development trials, and it needs a bit more testing, and it'll get done. So not just that, even the munitions that all of our aircraft have to carry, NG arm, Rudra Mark II, all of these will get certified this year if all tests go through perfectly. And ULPGM version 1 is ready. ULPGM 2 version is getting ready, and it is going through certification. And Tara, the REK plus guidance has just begun. It'll take a few years to get ready. And the Tara kit is like a JDAM kit where you tack it on to a 250 or a 450 or a 500 kilogram bomb and turn it into a smart munition. Right. So that has just begun, and it'll take a few years to get ready.
Tara is actually better in some ways because it has a very capable front end seeker, right? So let's not go into the details of that. And the other thing is, to answer the question I posed earlier, AMCA is somewhere between steps 1 and 2 at the moment, which is subsystem realization and system realization, because both are progressing simultaneously. And in terms of the first prototype, it is probably at system realization because the first prototype of the AMCA and the program envisages at least 5 prototypes. Right, the first prototype will be used to prove the plan form, essentially the flight characteristics, etc.
Aerodynamics, flight
exactly.
controls.
Yeah, so in terms of that, and obviously control law. So in terms of that, it is fairly advanced, right? So it can move quicker. It'll move towards integration. The first prototype I'm talking about. See, unlike the Tejas Mark II project, where the 4 prototypes that are being produced are all going to be close to production standard. That is how it was intended to be, and that is why the Tejas Mark II will enter production fairly quickly also. In the case of the AMCA, we are actually following more of that old sort of paradigm where we will go stepwise from the first prototype to the last one in terms of complexity, capability, etc. So, keeping that in mind, a first flight by N27 or somewhere in the middle of 28 is actually not out of the question as far as the AMCA project is concerned.
Second, last third of 2028, September, October-ish.
That is what they're saying because they want to manage expectations. But I think the push from above is also quite substantial as far as this project is concerned. So people might be positively surprised for once. Anyway, let's leave it at that. But at the moment, as Sriram said, the idea is to fly by at least September, October 28. Now, the other thing that we need to look at is the enablers. Of course, we'll talk about that in another IH, probably because we'll be doing other Aero India IHs in the coming days. Now, as far as weapons development is concerned, Sriram talked about NGAR and basically Rudra Mark 1, Rudra Mark 2, which comes in 3 different configurations. Forms. Actually. Yeah. And you have the heavy duty Rudra Mark 3. Why don't you give a minor update on the Rudra Mark 3, Sriram? I think people should.
Not really got much on the Mark 3, but a lot on the Mark 2. The Mark 2 has 3 versions. One is pure INS GPS, which is you punch in the coordinates for what you want to hit and the damn thing goes and hits. And the Rudra Mark II is a giant missile, 1.5 tons, and it's got a multi-100 kilo warhead. So you can, and it flies in at Mach 2.5. So you can imagine the amount of energy that it carries in. So it's a big boy. And the other version is the anti-radiation version, which has a PHH, passive homing head. And the other one is an IAR seeker. And I posted a picture on Twitter a couple of days back of the warhead that goes into the Rudra Mark II. So you have an initial, it's like the Nag, right? But the Nag is a chota missile with small warheads. But this thing is the same thing, but same tandem warhead, initial shape charge, and a huge warhead behind it, which pushes through the hole that the shape charge makes. So bunker busting really big reinforced targets like bridges and shelters and stuff like that. That is what it's made for. So all of these will the INS version is already done. It's been tested, flight tested, carried, capital flight trials. All of it is done, and it's proven. It's got a very small CEP. Let's wait for DRDO to put it out, and the other two will get proved very soon. The hope is within a year and a half, maybe max two, depending on how the seekers perform. But we've already had experience with both type of seekers, from the Rudram Mark 1 and all sorts of missiles for the IAR seeker. So that should not be an issue. It's just about making it fly and hitting different targets, and it should be ready. And this thing is solid rocket motor, and it's not the BrahMos in terms of cost and complexity. So we have two really big missiles, and the Rudram Mark II will be integrated on the MiG-29K, and the Navy therefore has a giant missile to hit with compared to the Exocets and KH-59s and whatever else they've bought from the Israelis, right? So whether how effective it will be, we'll leave it to the Navy to talk about. And uh, there was
Don't
one
forget the other thing. Don't forget the other thing. The MiG-29K will also be armed within the near future,
Astra
right?
Mark II,
No, the air to ground and anti-shipping, that is
NASAM
naval
MR,
anti-ship missile MR, medium
NASAM
range.
MR.
Yes, yeah.
The
So
NASAM MR again is a 250 300 kilometer ranged missile, and it'll be run by turbo, uh, gas turbine engine, and that is the ATGG that we've spoken about a couple of months back, which GTR is working on, and it'll take a few years to get to induction ready state, but work is going on that. The initial prototypes are getting built, and once they get to decent maturity on the test benches and there's enough confidence, then we'll have enough another engine run, production run, so that they can be fitted on the missiles, and flight testing will be done. Until then, they have a stopgap engine to be used, like always, and we should see it getting inducted before the end of the decade, hopefully.
So as you can see, there's a lot going on the weapons development front, and that is a key element of air power. Air power is not just about a shiny,
Flying around.
fancy platform. Yeah, it's about what weapons your so-called platforms can deploy, and that is extremely important today in an era when you are seeing integrated air defenses propping up everywhere, right? Propping up both. So what we need to keep in mind is that air power is not a simple head-to-head comparison between the fighters on either side. Okay, that whole issue of running a very large industrial system basically, and composed of very complex systems. So a large industrial system of systems is what air power is today. And obviously, you often hear the term technology intensive. Obviously, it is technology intensive, which means that it is also important that you have control over said technology, and that you don't have a pool of systems which are made up of, which are black boxes of varying degrees, which is why indigenization of Indian air power is so important, and much more important than saying that, oh, this is and this is where you must put this whole issue of whether this is going to become obsolete, or that is obsolescent, or that is the great new shining toy hanging from a tree, into the proper perspective. All these things, whether it be Tejas Mark II or the AMC, etc., all have open architecture avionics, right? So they will be upgraded over time with weapons and sensors that are of relevant to combat in that particular era, in the coming era. And that is a key element of being able to, run a system of systems properly. If you don't have control, if you don't have design control, then you can forget about this system of systems approach. You will just end up with these small clumps of platforms that may not necessarily talk to each other, and will not be able to operate together as a sum of parts that is greater than the whole, which is what you want to really achieve in terms of air power today,
Yeah,
right?
and
Which
it's
is why
not
you're
just,
talking about
yeah,
man unmanned teaming,
it's
etc.
not just that. For every single conflict that we've had so far, we've always fought using platforms which are technologically not on par with whatever the Pakistanis had, be it tanks or whatever, right? Even fighters for that example. So, see, for all the bad mouthing and bad names that the forces get, they've performed brilliantly with not cutting edge systems, right? Against the Pakistanis, who've always been the poster child for the Americans, and who've always got state of the art systems, export versions, if you want to call it, but they've had better systems than ours in a lot of times, right? Tanks, for example. So it's not that our guys cannot fight and perform and win, even with -1 systems. So the point is, our systems, we are trying to give them whatever is state of the art. Correct. So that is one part of the argument. The other thing, as he said, was when it comes to obsolescence, and when it comes to obsolescence, as long as you have the architecture which can absorb newer technologies as and when they come up and they mature, you don't have an obsolescent platform. That is out of the question. The other thing was, see, as you go into the future, you should also be having a platform which can react quickly. Take the Russian conflict for example. They've put bolted on, haphazardly welded wing kits on their bombs, and see how quickly they came up with it. Everybody knows, right, how we did the LGB thing during Kargil. We had to rush through multiple processes to get it compressed, the timeline, right, and get them on the Mirages to go and drop bombs on all of those heights. Now, if it's a foreign platform, like how we are paying the French 800 crores to integrate our own AIPs and torpedoes, that is not something that we should be doing going forward on fighter platforms. It should be our own platform, our own weapons, so that we don't spend so much. Take the BrahMos also, right? The air launch BrahMos, when the BrahMos team and HAL went to the Russians and said, "Arey, see, we want to make it into an air launch version. Can you help us out, because you're the OEM, and there are all sorts of data that we need from you. Can you help us integrate it?" They asked for an enormous, ridiculous amount of money. Then all of these guys came back and said, "You know what, let's just try it ourselves." And they did it for a fraction of the cost that the Russians had asked for. And this is on a platform that we've spent so much time and effort integrating all our weaponry on it. So if you have your own platform, you don't even need to go and ask somebody. You're the OEM, you're the weapons developer, you're the mission computer developer. It is up to you to integrate everything. And even while designing it, you will develop it so that it works with your own systems. Now, this is something that I've heard recently at the Aero India seminar about integrating any munition that we develop onto the entire IAF fleet. The Indian Air Force has French aircraft, Indian aircraft, Russian aircraft, right? And with the Jaguar, it is French-British aircraft.
Anglo-French.
Anglo-French, sorry. Yeah. So we have 4 different types of aircraft on which you have to integrate one particular munition. Say it's a airdrop bomb, correct? So each of them has a different launcher. The launcher has different lug positions where it hooks onto the bombs, and each launcher provides electrical power in different versions. Voltages are different, currents are different, the power supplies the capability is different, and the way you have to talk to the mission computer on those aircraft is different. So if I'm a munitions developer, I have to take in account all of these, and I have to prove my weapon on all of these aircraft. Imagine the cost and time overhead you will incur on trying to induct one particular munition across your fleet. This is why having your own aircraft and your own systems is so important. Otherwise, you'll end
Okay.
up doing one particular munition for 10 years.
Don't also forget that the Russians then came to us after they found that we had succeeded in integrating the BrahMos onto the Sukhoi 30. Right. So when you generate IP, when you generate and create IP, that is when the world comes to you. That is the other lesson from that story. So all the elements are coming together now, in my view, regardless of all the dissonance there that we found was put on display, etc., etc. And while India's enemies can, for the moment, rejoice or take a lot of what should I say, or get a lot of juice out of what they are seeing, a few years down the line they will realize that it was cold comfort for them. Let me just put it that way. Okay, because if they think that it is only they who can surprise us, then they are mistaken. They will be surprised very soon, and one of them will be surprised very badly, in my view. Anyway, so whatever be the, having said that, let us now also talk about some of the more minor projects. I hate to use the word minor over here, but in any case, because I don't, because it in no way reflects their actual importance. Minor in the sense of outlay, minor in the sense of their visibility, minor in the sense of what the goals are, essentially. So let us talk about an unmanned platform, for instance. A lot of people would be interested in this. What did you learn about HAL's RUAV 200, for instance, at Aero India 25 this time? I mean, where are we at with that program? What is happening? What is the level of commitment that we are seeing over there?
So it is a 150 odd crores program, and I hope people have seen our interview with the chaps who are leading the program um, from an earlier Aero India. Very confident young group who want to do it. So COVID had its issues with subsystem deliveries, and on top of it, we have typical government related procedural issues which have pushed timelines. And the user, which was the army, suddenly decided that for logistics they would rather go to the private sector. And we've seen news articles about the army procuring logistics drones from the private sector, and they were all uh, electric driven, not internal combustion engines, right? They're not hydrocarbon powered. So they came back to the team and said, for logistics, we have a different plan. Why don't you convert it into an ISR platform? So then the Noscon EO pod got deleted, and they now have a bigger pod under the belly, which will give them better range and better performance for the ISR role. And despite all of this change in role and probably numbers also that we're not privy to, uh, despite all of these changes, the team has gone forward and gotten it ready. They have a couple of prototypes, I believe, and they're going to fly very soon. Their engine ground run and all of those have already been done. They will do a test flight very soon. There was apparently a lot of expectation that they would fly by Aero India, but programs do not run based on fancy, so they take their own time. We'll see the RUAV prototype fly very soon, maybe in a couple of months. By summer, we should be able to see it. So hopefully, yeah, fingers crossed. A lot of strength to that team who's doing it. But there needs to be a bit more effort uh, from the whole enterprise, but yeah, hopefully the team can get it done and meet the expectations.
Mm.
That is what we
That
learned.
that does sound as if things might start moving again. Although, the level of commitment to these minor programs definitely needs to be heightened, in my view, because although we are labeling them as minor programs, as I clarified before, just a few minutes ago, their impact could be could be major in some ways. So these are programs that also need to be shepherded properly beyond the marquee programs that are, the most visible sort of elements of air power, etc. Now, we also saw in Aero India some other very interesting things being displayed. For instance, we saw a lot of things being done on the networking side as well. Now, without going into too many details, because these are things that should not be discussed threadbare, obviously, on the internet. But how do you see our own data links and SDR based networking shaping up in
Yeah.
the coming years?
Before we get to that, there was let's just clarify on what Rishabh wanted answered. Why IRST and not EOTS? See, the IRST is closer to fruition now, so it makes sense to put that on the AMCA for now, and EOTS is just begun, right? Comparatively, uh, so it'll take time for everything to get developed and to get to a maturity where it can be put on the AMCA. So until then, the plan is to have an IRST, and once the UATS is ready, it'll get deleted and the UATS will go on. That is the plan, at least as far as how we understand it. And one more question was about the LDP lightning, right? So we have our own. One sec, let me just show. Huh. So I hope you guys have seen this tweet from, check the date. This is 2 years ago, right? So this is the IRST, which is being developed at IRDE, right? And it goes on the LCA Mark II, AMCA, and the TED-BF. So one subsystem development, and it goes across multiple aircraft programs, which is why we need to do it in India. And quick point out: look at the range detection ranges, and we will talk about it in detail as to what the IRST can do in a future episode. Sorry.
No, what IRSTs can do in general, actually, but not specifically what our IRST will do.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question with
On the
from
LDP,
Sarthak Ghosh.
we have our
Yeah,
own program. It will mature when it does. So, but rest assured,
yeah,
we have a plan for a replacement or an analog to the lightning pod.
yeah. So, okay, so we have a question from Sarthak Ghosh who says, I've heard ADA scientists casually use the term 6th gen. What I don't understand is that Americans showed the world what 5th gen is. So, without them openly setting the benchmark, what do these scientists even claim? But that is the whole point. What does anyone even claim? You have the Chinese showing a bunch of so-called 6th gen demonstrators or prototypes. I don't think one of them is a prototype actually. Maybe one is, but the other is definitely a demonstrator. And the whole world went into a tizzy and lambasted, and obviously the Indian setup was lambasted most of all, because we are still, trying to build fourth gen fighters, 4+ gen fighters, at a decent rate. So that is, your very question actually is the answer. 6th gen is loosely defined at the moment, and who is going to set the benchmark on 6th gen is also an open question. Bill Sweetman a few years ago had written an article which said that the Gripen NG was a 6th gen fighter. And it was tongue in cheek in some ways, but a few points were also made in that. Okay. So 6th gen has to be something that is quite a bit ahead of what a 5th gen platform on its own can do. Then you can probably call something 6th gen, right? If we go by just the notion of how we define generations. So it's ill defined at the moment. It's not
I
properly defined at
I would
all.
say uh, marked progress in terms of platform automation, mission related automation, as well as working as part of a node. right? The whole system of systems and working as part of a man done man team to a greater extent than what is currently being seen, right? That would loosely define a few features of a 6th gen system. But again, let's wait for the Americans to bring out what they already have. That would set the benchmark for what everybody else defines 6th gen to be. And the Americans will not put out anything until they've already fielded it and they've done multiple iterations on their own. So we will never
No,
see a Mark 1 of theirs.
Indronil has nailed it in the comment in the chat box. By the way, Indronil is here. He
Uh,
says that lack of a vertical tail equal to 6th gen. So yeah, but the counter would be then the
Flying
B2 stealth
wings.
bomber is also, yeah, any flying wing would be 6th gen. But no, but the point is well made. So the point is that the whole issue is that 6th gen is still a nebulous entity. Let us put it that way. Okay, what exactly is 6th gen? Whatever we are going to see, even NGAD, I would say, would not be a true 6th gen fighter unless and until we see that variable cycle engine work on it. Yes, then I'll be willing to say. In fact, for me personally, a 6th gen fighter should have at least a variable cycle engine, a three-stream variable cycle engine to be precise. Okay, that is what a 6th gen with a variable bypass ratio. That is the kind of thing that you need for when you
Technology
talk
jump.
about 6th gen. Yeah, yeah, that's a real technology jump. That is what will really matter, even more so than running algorithms on the edge, or getting them to get training them on the edge, or better AI, better networking, better ad hoc networking, etc. I would say that would be the defining characteristic for me. And obviously, the Americans are ahead of everybody else in that respect. So, in that sense, they may set the benchmark yet again as to what truly is going to be a 6th gen fighter, as Shatsa Ghosh was just sort of saying.
Yeah. Coming back to
And
networks and data
yeah,
links and
yeah.
SDR. So this is again another thing that we've been following closely for a while. Uh, as far as data links go, our guys have done a great job. Deal is the lab that does all of this. Be it data links for UAVs or between the other entities that exist in the Air Force, be it satellites and from AWACS to the ground, AWACS to the fighters, and everything else that flies and is on the ground. So Deal has done a lot of work, and they've come to a maturity where you no longer need imported subsystems. Once all of these go into production, then it'll all be indigenous. Another thing is SDR. So I know lots been written about SDR and need for it, especially post Balakot. So again, Deal has been the nodal agency for development, and the Navy was the first one to jump on that bandwagon to develop indigenous SDR, and it has already been fielded across surface vessels. And the see again, the thing with SDRs is that you have hardware, and then you have multiple waveforms that can be software driven, and that is how the whole architecture works. Let's not go into too much detail today, but all of these
No details. No, not
yeah
on these
yeah
subjects.
yeah
Yeah.
so all of these SDRs that each service procures has to talk to each other. It's called interoperability. So guy on the ground has to be able to call up a fighter and say, please prosecute this target who's against me. So getting people to talk across services, across frequency bands is a necessity for all the jointness that we keep talking about. So you can't have one entity having an indigenous SDR and somebody else buying it from an Israeli firm, somebody else buying it from L3 Harris. That cannot work. So we've been hearing and uh, requesting for somebody to put all of these guys together, be it Bell, be it DRDO Labs, and a few private sector companies who are doing this at the cutting edge, right, in the civilian domain. So all of them had the same request that somebody has to sit everybody together, create a framework so that interoperability is built into designs when all of these are being developed. And Very, very glad to say that that has happened. Again, no details, but going forward, we will not have any issues, should not have any issues with interoperability and SDR development. The focus is more and more indigenous, and it will happen, including the LCA, which right now flies with the Rafale BNet. Even that will be replaced by an indigenous option very, very soon. So that was white pill news for us to hear, and it was entirely by chance. We didn't expect to hear all of this, but see, again, these are small, small building blocks in the whole ecosystem, but they make an outsized impact when it comes to war fighting because they enable a lot of these jointness and ease of work, which you can update on the fly. I keep coming back to the Russian example in the Ukraine war. Everybody goes back and says, "Today this happened. Tomorrow I want something else that will tackle this opposition tactic. I want this to be tacked on, bolted on for all I care. As long as it flies and I can do it, I don't really care if it looks ugly." That is what you can do if it's your own system. If it is something that you buy from the French, imagine how much you have to pay for it and
See,
how
that's
quickly
the
it will get
point.
done.
How quickly do you want warfighting capability? That is the real question. Okay. It's not a
Responding
question.
on the day
Yeah.
of battle,
Yeah.
that will take a lot of time. And uh, the other thing that we saw, which is very nice to see, was the serpentine intake duct of the Swift. The very first video that we did was about the intake duct. So please go back and listen to it. Very interesting about aerodynamics of how air is fed to the engine without much distortion, even though you have to send it through an S duct. That was nice
Okay.
to
So,
see.
so you now have another question, and to answer this question, I'm going to go into dark IH mode. Okay. So this is me answering this particular question, which is the question is that F-35 without the NATO standard capability still makes sense. See, this answer cannot be given with your head uncovered. Okay, this requires you to be, embrace the darkness, as it were. Now, F-35 never will make sense either in this timeline or some other timeline or in a third timeline. Right, for India, you're just going to get a black box that will lead to the sequestration of your air force into those clumps that I talked about. That is what is going to happen with the
They
F-35.
cannot talk to each other. Personal movement, who gets allowed into a particular base, who gets to work on maintenance of these aircraft. It it puts too many restrictions on any sovereign nation.
Yeah, and so it needs to be understood